This ESPN podcast is brought to you by Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit geico.com.
The Pirates and Cardinals have the best two records in baseball, and they go head-to-head one final time this regular season. Could this be a preview of next week's division series? Coverage begins Wednesday at 6:30 Eastern on ESPN Radio.
The topics are hot. The discussion is heated. And we're on fire. The First Take Podcast starts now.
Here's what's ahead on the First Take Podcast. Kam Chancellor ends his holdout. So are the Seahawks ready to roll? Plus, we look back on the legacy of Yogi Berra. And can the Cowboys win with Weeden? Those topics and so much more coming at you right now. Welcome into First Take. Good morning. Thank you for being with us. Skip Bayless, Stephen A. Smith, Molly Karam here. Guys, it's been a crazy morning already.
These are the kind of days I love doing this show with you.
What's up, man? Good to see you, bro.
Good job on your breaking news.
Me, Adam Schefter, all the football gurus.
Okay.
They are good gurus.
Yes, they are.
We got a lot of breaking news.
I'm just a humble co-host.
No,
Yeah.
we got a lot of breaking news today from last night as well. We're going to get into it. We blew up the rundown, so here we go. Let's get you guys caught up. The Cowboys quarterback situation, obviously, that's heating up in Dallas. What do the guys make of it? We'll dive into that. Plus, Terrell Owens reaches out to the Cowboys. Should we get our popcorn ready? We'll fill you in there as well. But first, Stephen A., you have some breaking news involving Kam Chancellor's holdout. Let's get into that right away.
Kam Chancellor has decided that he's going to end his holdout. He's going to report back to the Seattle Seahawks. He and I text back and forth this morning, and essentially, without reading exactly what he said, what it comes down to is that he made a promise to Marshawn Lynch a couple of years ago about what they were going to do. His goal is to get back and capture a Super Bowl that they feel they lost last year, that they think they deserve. And more importantly than anything else, it really hurt him to see his team out there losing games without him, knowing that he could have made a big difference. He talked about his teammates. He talked about what he owed to them. He talked about what he owed to Marshawn Lynch and how that commitment to his teammates and the guys that he goes to war with is bigger than his business issues right now. He made no bones about the fact that he will not ignore the issues of being underpaid as the safety for the Seattle Seahawks, but he acknowledged that those are things that could and should be addressed in the offseason. Right now, as things presently stand, they're 0-2 and in danger of falling apart. And he realizes that he simply cannot just stand by the wayside and allow this to happen. And in fairness, to everybody involved, I'm not the only person that talked to Kam Chancellor. I'm quite sure Ray Lewis has spoken to Kam Chancellor. I know that Adam Schefter does his due diligence, and he knew exactly everything that was going on because he and I spoke as well. So you want to give credit to them. But in the end, what it comes down to is that Kam Chancellor recognizes that he is needed, and more importantly, it would be very, very difficult for him to live with himself if he just sat on the sidelines while his teammates went out on that field and struggled the way that he has seen them struggle over the last 2 weeks. He's shoving all of that business stuff aside for the ultimate goal.
So, as yet, do you have any idea what concessions were made on either side? Just let it go?
He was at about 4.5.
Yeah.
Remember, they came up to 8.1.
There's like 900,000.
It was about 900,000.
Yeah.
No concessions were made. No conversations took place. He just decided that it's time to go back and handle his business on that football field, and it's something that they can revisit in the offseason.
Wow. That is noble. That is impressive. That is exactly what I thought and said on this show he should have done maybe a week ago. I get it, I get the impasse, and I know the philosophical differences that he wanted to be taken care of a little bit, at least in another year, by having some money moved up. But if you love your football team, as I know he does, and you like your chances even at 0-2, you gotta. I know some people look at it as cave in. It's not that he's caving in. He's just coming back for the good of his brethren. That's what he's doing. The guys that he's gone to battle with.
Well, I want to make sure that I'm very, very clear about something here. According to Kam, there were conversations with the Seattle Seahawks in the past, obviously. From what I heard from other people, not Kam, Kam had told folks that John Snyder, general manager for the Seattle Seahawks, essentially looked him dead in his face and told him, I'm not taking care of you this year, next year, or the year after. You're under contract. Now, obviously, when you talk about the NFL culture, how teams can go to a player, ask them to restructure their deals, waive them, cut them, take a pay cut, etc., Kam Chancellor was very, very offended by that. Now, I'm not here to cast aspersions on John Snyder. I don't know him. I know that he's considered very, very good at his job. Obviously, he's got a Super Bowl championship and 2 consecutive Super Bowl appearances on his resume. Used to work for the Green Bay Packers, used to work for the Washington Redskins, even though he's only 43, 44 years of age. His resume is quite impressive, to be quite honest with you. So understanding that and knowing that I don't know him, nor have I ever spoken to this man, I want to be very, very clear. In no way am I trying to cast any aspersions on him. I'm just conveying the whole thought process that was given to me by Kam and others close to Kam about what Kam was feeling throughout this whole process. He felt disrespected. He felt like his manhood was brought into play because a guy can look you in the face and tell you under no circumstances is he going to take care of you at all, considering what Kam Chancellor goes out on the field and does. His pride was a part of the equation. And so as a result of that, that's why he was so steadfast and resolute in his commitment to holding out.
Yep.
I think the loss to Green Bay on Sunday night, how they looked in the fourth quarter after taking a 17-13 lead, how the defense appeared to have fallen apart, I think really, really hit home for him. And I don't know if he'll admit it or if any of those other guys will admit it. I don't even know if they'll acknowledge having talked to him, but I suspect, I don't know for sure, but I suspect that the great Ray Lewis had something to do with talking to him as well.
And by the way, what did he say on your radio
Ray Lewis
show?
came on my radio and said he deserves his money, he should get his money, Seattle should give him his money, etc. But I can't leave my troops out there while they're going to war without me. I can't leave them hanging like that. That's just not something that I could do. But that was before Ray Lewis realized that it was a man thing, because you got to treat guys like men. Ray Lewis also alluded to that as well. You've got to treat brothers like men. You can't sit up there, look them in their face, and tell them under no circumstances are you going to take care of them. After you took care of Richard Sherman, after you took care of Marshawn Lynch, after you took care of Russell Wilson and a couple of other guys, you can't then turn around and say to the quarterback and the heart and the soul of your defense, who is Kam Chancellor, that we are not going to do anything for you, and expect him to just accept that so easily. That is not something that he was going to do. He was resolute in his commitment to hold out. I believe that his mind changed. And, you know, we spoke an hour ago. I got the impression that that loss on Sunday night to Green Bay, the manner in which they lost, resonated with him in such a fashion that he finally came to the conclusion, the hell with Snyder, Carroll, and everybody else in the front office. I'll deal with that in the off season. I can't leave my boys hanging like this, and that's why he's gone back.
I personally thought he would come to that conclusion after what happened in Week 1 at St. Louis when they gave up 34 in overtime to Nick Foles.
Well, you got to remember,
that was stunning.
You got to remember it's the preseason. You're not getting a lot of action in the preseason because you want to make sure you're healthy for the regular season, and sometimes a little rust, you know, absence of activity. Really getting your bearings under you can play a role in how you look in Week 1. A lot of NFL players assume that they're not going to be near their best in Week 1 because that's when you're really getting hit for the first time. You're really out there going after it, you know, in a regular season game. But Sunday night against Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay.
Although that was somewhat predictable, somewhat. It is the bad man that is Aaron Rodgers, right?
It's predictable, but then again, it isn't from the perspective of you have it locked in. It's one thing if you just play a bad game and you might still hold out. But when you play well for 3 quarters and then you fall apart when it counts most, that speaks to an absence of leadership more than anything else at any other time.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what resonated with him.
So despite the fact that all of his notable brothers on that football team have been taken care of, let's reiterate the fact that he didn't have just 1 year left on his deal or 2 years left. He had 3 full years left, and they were willing just to move up some money from the 3rd year into the second year. I believe that's
well, he wasn't asking. His position all along is that he wasn't asking for quote unquote more money. He wanted some of the money that was designated for him in 2017 to be moved up to 2016.
Correct.
So he could be secure.
Okay. So going forward, this is your Super Bowl pick. Do you think this will immediately change the culture and life in Seattle?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
so
I
you
do.
think they'll get right back on track?
I think they'll get right back on track. I think with Kam Chancellor on that field, particularly the kind of mission that he's on, he feels that he's undervalued, not just monetarily, but because of the manner in which he was spoken to by John Snyder, supposedly. He didn't tell me that. A couple of his teammates told me that. But in the end, when you have that kind of feeling, if you thought Kam Chancellor was violent before on the football field, I think you're going to see a little something extra. But also the thing that I think you have to watch out for, not everybody inside that locker room was openly supportive of him and his position. And if there is a danger in all of this, is that he'll remember that too. Yep. He knows that there were a lot of guys, especially Marshawn Lynch, because that is a name he mentioned specifically. To come back for Marshawn Lynch. I mean, he said coming back for Marshawn Lynch. How Marshawn Lynch and I made promises to one another a couple of years ago. I can't leave my dog hanging like that. That's a quote from him.
I respect that.
So when you look at it from that perspective, clearly somebody like Marshawn Lynch, I would say of all the players in the locker room, that's the biggest reason he's coming back. There are others who have supported him, but there are others who are either tepid in their support or non-existent in their support at all. And he's going to remember them too, and that could be dangerous.
I believe the head coach was not on his bandwagon on this one,
He's not thinking about. He knows about Pete Carroll.
Yeah.
He doesn't feel the same about Pete Carroll.
I'm sure he does.
All right, but I'm talking players.
Sure.
There were players that weren't openly supportive of him. They were like, life can go on without me.
Yep.
We play 11 on 11. I think that's a quote from Richard Sherman. I'm not saying Richard Sherman didn't support him. I'm saying we don't know how Kam Chancellor is going to receive those things.
Yeah.
And that's where that's the danger part that can come into the equation. But Cam knows he has no shot at validating his significance to that franchise if they start losing even when he comes back.
Well,
they have to win.
He shouldn't have a big problem validating his value to that team this Sunday. This Sunday they got the Chicago Bears in Seattle.
Jimmy Clausen,
Jimmy Clausen, can you handle that one, Cam? I think you can.
The 12.
Then they get Detroit, who's sort of a semi-gimme, if you will, the next week in Seattle. Then they have to go to Cincinnati, and then it starts to get tough, and you'll start to figure it out.
For your edification, is something that you need to know. These players in Seattle don't just want the Super Bowl. They want New England.
Good.
I just want you to know that.
Yeah, well, trust me, Tom Brady ain't flinching on that one.
Right.
Because he torched the Legion of without there's no B in it in the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl. Greatest fourth quarter of a Super Bowl I have ever seen from the great Tom Brady, the best quarterback in the National Football League. And I'm sure he would relish the opportunity to repeat that performance against those same Seattle Seahawks. I'm going to go on record right now as there's no way they're going to get back to the Super Bowl. I just don't see it. There's two. You spoke of this little dissension, that dissension, this dissension, this dissension. We haven't even talked about Jimmy Graham, who's clearly unhappy because he's not getting the football. I don't know why. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but they're just not throwing him the football yet. So with all that dissension, all that uneasiness under the carpet in the locker room versus Pete Carroll, and still it goes all the way back to resonating to the call at the end of the Super Bowl game. I just don't know if you can climb out of that. I'm not sure about that. We'll see.
I have to pay attention to two teams. One of them is not the Cowboys. I'm paying no attention to the Cowboys. I would tell you that the Green Bay Packers, I would have paid attention to them if Jordy Nelson had been healthy, because I think that they would have had the best record in football. I think their home field advantage would have been in their pocket, and the road to the Super Bowl would have had to come through Lambeau Field, which I think would have been tough for anybody. Merrill Hodge came on my radio show yesterday on Sirius XM, and he said Arizona is a team to watch out for. You got to remember that Carson Palmer, they're 14-2 in his last 16 starts. Carson Palmer, that is, under the stewardship of Bruce Arians, who can really coach his butt off. And they have no fear of Seattle. But I'm still sticking with Seattle. I predicted that Seattle was going to go back, not just go back to the Super Bowl, but win it all. And the only way I will modify my pick in any way is if the Pittsburgh Steelers manage to get to the Super Bowl against them. Then I will think about it, and I reserve the right to revisit that conversation. Outside of that, I am not picking against Seattle at all. I believe that the Seattle Seahawks will win 12 of their next 14 games.
And I reserve the right to hang in with a football team that will get back Greg Hardy and Rolando McClain and Randy Gregory and ultimately Des Bryant and Tony Romo and be the force to be reckoned with, even by your Seattle Seahawks, who have to, if memory serves, visit Jerry World this year.
I will tell you this. If Russell Wilson runs the ball more the way he ran on Sunday when he was chalking up 78 yards over those first three-plus quarters, I'm here to tell you right now, ain't nobody beating Seattle.
Ain't nobody beating Seattle.
Really?
All right. Stephen A. has him going to the Super Bowl. Skip, not so much. We'll revisit your Cowboys a little later in the show. But I'm happy for that entire fan base, the 12s, and for the Seahawks to get Kam Chancellor back. Breaking news also in Cleveland. After Johnny Manziel led the team to victory on Sunday over the Titans, starting for Josh McCown, who was sidelined due to concussion that he suffered in Week 1, there were question marks as to who would start moving forward. Well, McCown has been cleared to play, and this just in. He's going to start on Sunday when the Browns host the Raiders. Skip, what does this mean for Johnny now moving forward?
Molly, Stephen A., here's my position. If the current head coach, Mike Pettin, and the current GM, Ray Farmer, and the current quarterback coach, John DeFilippo. Flip. I call him Flip. If they had pushed on draft night to draft Johnny Manziel, which none of them obviously did, Johnny would be starting on Sunday because they would be doing everything in their power to prop him up and make him a success in Cleveland, Ohio. But they're going back to Josh McCown because they all fear for their jobs. They're all teetering. This could be the last year of yet another regime in Cleveland, Ohio, this one, the Mike Pettin regime. I'm not a big fan of Mike Pettin as a head football coach. I'm not sure about Ray Farmer. I have no idea how John DeFilippo got this job with no resume, no credentials, first-time offensive coordinator in the National Football League. And I feel sorry for Johnny that he's stuck in this situation, and I'm hoping against hope that somehow he can find his way out of Cleveland and into a fresh start, as albeit somebody's backup quarterback somewhere else. Dallas, Texas, maybe at some point. Who knows? But look, with Johnny Manziel, you either gulp the Kool-Aid or you spit it out. You love him or you despise everything that he is. And I thought it was telling, even though it was an amusing anecdote. I think I read it wherever it was, USA Today. Molly and I talked about it before the show. When Johnny made his very extemporaneous scramble out of the pocket outside of Arakpo, ran to his left, threw across his body. Travis Benjamin hit him right in stride for the second and clinching touchdown in the game last Sunday. DeFilippo said into his headset, very quietly, with no emotion, coaching's overrated. Well, you can laugh at that because sometimes coaching is overrated when it comes to Johnny Manziel. But coaches do not want to be overrated, and these coaches want to maintain control of their offense. And it's hard to control what Johnny does and doesn't do because Johnny's going to do whatever he feels like will work at that moment. Cliff Kingsbury, now the head coach at Texas Tech, used to tell me that when he was the coordinator at A&M, Johnny would come to the sideline, as he's winning a Heisman Trophy, and say, "Coach, I'm sorry, I apologize." And Kingsbury would say, "You never have to apologize for scoring a touchdown." Well, it's the same with these guys, except you do have to apologize to this staff because they don't like you scoring a touchdown even that way. And I look at the skill players, I put quotes around skill players, around Johnny Manziel. It's pathetic. It's the worst in the National Football League. I'm looking at Isaiah Crowell as their leading rusher. He was undrafted. Travis Benjamin's the leading. He's the only threat they have on offense. He was a fourth-round pick.
He's played well.
Yeah, he has played very well because he can fly. But Andre Hawkins, he was undrafted. Gary Barnidge is a tight end, was a fifth-round pick of Carolina. Are you serious? This is it. This is what you're working with. The offensive line outside of the left tackle is very good, is below average. They have a hard time protecting anybody, including Josh McCown or Johnny Manziel. So this is what you're stuck with. It was amazing that Johnny won the game the other day. I know he hit only 9 out of 18 passes, but the 2 big touchdowns. And they were fortunate they were playing against a Marcus Mariota who was flat out overmatched even against Patton's defense, which had figured out that all he does is pick and pop, dink and dunk. And if you'll take away the first quick read, you'll make him struggle. And they hit him and they knocked him around, and you made the point he got dinged early in the game and he was never the same. But my point is, this is what Johnny is stuck with. So in a way, I'm relieved for him not having to start for this team. But again, if he had a support system around him, an organization that believed in him, he'd be the starting quarterback, and they would be doing everything in their power to tailor the offense to make him the success that I know he can be in the National Football League.
Well, I think a legitimate argument can be made that you are being unfair to the Cleveland Browns organization. But I will say that to you in fairness to you and your football expertise, because what I'm about to point out is something Merrill Hodge told me, as opposed to me knowing it myself.
He's the biggest anti-Johnny critic.
But he wasn't in this particular instance, he wasn't criticizing Johnny Manziel, because I am aware of that. But I just want to throw this out to you to see what makes sense. He talked about how they didn't require Johnny Manziel to stand in the pocket all afternoon long. There were no 2-step, 3-step drops or whatever. Now, he ended up throwing some long passes to Travis Benjamin, who had about 3 receptions for 115 yards and 2 touchdowns. We know that. But at no time was Johnny Manziel required to do those things, because they didn't believe that tailored to his game, nor was he ready for it. Then they looked at their personnel and said, like you just said, what do we have? So when we look at it from that perspective, let me tell you what Johnny Manziel, his teammates, not Johnny Manziel himself, because when we were at the finals, I saw Johnny Manziel on a couple of occasions, all right, and those conversations that he and I had, I'll leave to us, because he didn't ask me to divulge them. I'm certainly not going to violate his trust like that. But I will tell you what his teammates said, and they want it put out there. There's a difference between Brian Hoyer and Josh McCown. When you look at Brian Hoyer, he was that guy that wanted that job. Did y'all see that movie Draft Day? With Kevin Costner? He came on this show and talked about it. And if you remember, there's a scene in there, and it's amazing. Ironically, the franchise he was overseeing was Cleveland. And he was talking about how the quarterback on the team was worried about Kevin Costner drafting another quarterback. Okay, so he and his wife and them, they were worried about it, et cetera, et cetera. And they ended up drafting somebody on the defensive side of the ball. Well, that was Brian Hoyer last year. Brian Hoyer didn't want Johnny Manziel drafted. He wanted the job to be all of his own. And when it didn't work out that way, he certainly wasn't willing to help him. Now, you and I don't have a problem with that, because if you're competing for a job, it's no big deal. We understand it. That's what comes along with competitive fervor. So we get all of that. Josh McCown doesn't have that issue. And that's what those players wanted to point out. It's not a big deal that Josh McCown has been reinserted, because Josh McCown is not trying to be the starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. He understands that this is something that's ultimately going to be handed to Johnny Manziel. And what the teammates were telling me was that, look at Johnny Manziel. He looks incredibly happy and relaxed. And it's not just because of his sobriety. It's not just because he handled his issues with alcohol by going, and getting some help in the off season, which is well documented. It's because he knows that he has somebody playing the position with more experience who's willing to help him before gladly handing the baton to him. So when you take that into consideration and you combine that with the absence of weapons that he has at his disposal, I don't think there's anything wrong with Cleveland saying, we appreciate the job that you did last week, in 8 for 15 for 172 yards with 2 touchdowns. We appreciate the fact that you didn't throw any interceptions. You didn't turn the ball over. We like all of that stuff. But there's still some things you have to learn. And plus, we're buying you time, because we know what we're giving you to work with on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, they had 7 sacks. Defensively, what are you talking about? Brian Dansby, Hughes, Kruger, you got Whitner, all of these boys. That's 7 sacks. These boys are balling defensively, and we know their defense is they're no scrubs. So if the defense is keeping you in the game, but you're limited offensively, and ultimately it could lead to diminishing your level of confidence, I think that the Cleveland Browns may actually be doing something right on the offensive side of the ball for a change in terms of giving him some time to learn even more instead of throwing him to the wolves with the minimal amount of weapons he has.
Okay, I hear that case. Where I disagree is with your conclusion that they're waiting to hand the baton to Johnny Manziel. I don't buy that. I don't think that Mike Pettin and Ray Farmer want that baton ever handed permanently to Johnny Manziel. They don't believe in Johnny Manziel.
Well, you may be right about that, but what I'm saying is I clearly believe that they want him in there instead of McCown eventually. Now, even I'm just talking about for the purposes of this season. Obviously, if you could find somebody in the future you could go with, I definitely think they would. Listen, Johnny Manziel, miniature, likes to be a wild card, run with the football, sort of acts extemporaneously. You know, he's very impromptu in that regard. You may not want that if you are a head coach. So I certainly agree with Skip that from a long-term perspective, they're not that high on Johnny Manziel. But for the purposes of this season, I don't think they want somebody like McCown in there all 16 games. If Johnny Manziel develops to the point where they're able to insert him a few weeks into the season and allow him to be the starting quarterback for the team the rest of the way, you have to remember, at the very least, he's box office. At the very least, he's going to come, even though folks are going to watch football, he's going to fill the seats. You're going to be interested in what he's doing. And if he's not going to hurt you any more than McCown will, why not take a chance on him for this season? I definitely believe that's
the case. Now you've made my final point. The only way Johnny gets back in the lineup for good for the rest of this season is if Pettin crumbles under public pressure, because clearly the fans would much rather watch Johnny, even in a losing effort, than Josh McCown in a losing effort. So if they start to lose, which they almost certainly will, then at some point he's going to say, oh, gee, I got to distract the fans from this mess that we're making once again here. Maybe if I give him Johnny, they'll be happy for a little while and they won't scream and boo us so loudly. So I could see that happening, but long term, I'm not buying it.
Long term, I'm not buying it either, but I don't think it's just about public pressure. I think that as a coach, you kind of like, if you've got McCown as your option, you kind of like the thought of Johnny Manziel being out there. And you just pray that he's effective.
Yep.
You don't want him to kill you, but if he's effective, he's clearly more entertaining to watch. And then when you see how the teammates, galvanize around him, mobilize around him, that's a tribute to Johnny as well. So I think that Pettin and those boys would welcome that. The reason why it's hard to root against McCown is because McCown, from what I'm told, came in there from day one and was all about helping Johnny Manziel. I'm telling you, everyone there that I spoke to raved about the relationship that McCown was able to cultivate with Johnny Manziel, because he said, look, I've been here.
He's a professional cultivator. That's what he does. No, seriously, he goes to stop after stop and he cultivates.
He's like, this is what...
Well, seriously, he does.
Sure, he loves that.
But he's a cultivator. He's a good guy. He just sort of blends in.
He's a good guy. He's not a scrub.
No, he's not.
He can play a little bit. And more importantly, you got to appreciate, how could you hate on a guy that understands what he is and is willing to accept that to facilitate your growth?
And by the way, down the stretch in Chicago 2 years ago, boy, he was really good. He's better than Jay Cutler, and you'd say that's not a lot. But last quick point. My only last hope would be that the owner, Haslam, would blow out this coaching staff and maybe the executive office and pick a coach a la what happened with RG3 in Washington, Jay Gruden, pick a coach for Johnny that would drink that Kool-Aid, gulp the Kool-Aid, right? Okay, it didn't work out so well for RG3, but I would love to see that happen for Johnny's sake.
Gotcha.
But again, what you guys mentioned earlier, if you're a Johnny supporter, really two ways to look at it. Blessing in disguise because of the supporting cast, or let the guy, throw him into the fire. They're hosting the Raiders and keep the momentum going.
We'll see.
Hitting fifth, Yogi Berra catching. A high drive, that's trouble. And Yogi Berra self-swung high over the screen and into Bedford Avenue.
It ain't over until it's over. 90% of this game is half and over. When you come to the fork in the road, take it. It's deja vu all over again.
And the Yankees are champions. And look at Berra. Piggyback riding Bob Cazala.
Yogi Berra, a 3-time MVP, 18-time All-Star, and 10-time world champion, passed away last night at the age of 90. He died peacefully at his home in New Jersey with his family. Berra, of course, played his entire career with the New York Yankees, except for 4 games with the Mets in 1965. And his name appears just as often in famous quotations with his Yogi-isms that we all love as it does in record books. Skip, how will you remember Yogi Berra?
Stephen A., I know you're a longtime Yankee fan, but I'm older than you, and I think I followed closely your Yankees before your time. And I'm going to tell you that my one great regret about the life and times of Yogi Berra is that several generations, including this one, came to know him only for those malaprops we just heard, those Yogi-isms, if you will, instead of as the all-time great New York Yankee catcher and feared postseason clutch hitter that was the real Yogi Berra. I had the privilege of interviewing him a couple of times, one time in particular at length. He was extremely uncomfortable trying to be a comedian because it did not come naturally to him. These lines, these malaprops, just spilled naturally out of his mouth. I think later in his life he had some comedy writers for him who might have helped him with a couple of new ones. But he became a living legend in his later years, almost, if I can throw this out, as a cartoon character. And by the way, he had a real cartoon character, if you remember Yogi Bear, named after him, Yogi Berra. And it came to that for this man. And then as Molly pointed out, he won 10 rings. He holds all kinds of, I don't have time to go through all of his World Series records that he holds. And Stephen A., he won 3 MVPs, not 1 or 2, but 3, and he finished in the top 4 in the voting 4 other times. So that's 7 years of his career in which he was a factor to be the best player in all of baseball. You might not remember this, but on opening day about 3 years ago of the baseball season, we did our show from the Hard Rock Cafe in New York City.
Yeah, I remember.
And we tailored our show around, obviously, a lot of baseball, and especially because we were near Yankee Stadium, a lot of Yankee baseball. So we did a debate, top 5 all-time Yankees. And you were so upset with me because I included Yogi Berra as my 5th in the top 5, with obviously Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, DiMaggio, Mantle, Yogi. And I excluded your guy, Derek Jeter. And you said, how can you do that? And then we had the former Mayor Giuliani come on later, who's a longtime Yankee fan, and he sided with me and tried to sort of, not lecture you, but bring you up to speed on, hey, this guy was really, really great. And it gets lost in the fact that he's Yogi-isms. Oh, tell me another funny line. I'm not going to even read any of them because I don't want to distract our younger audience from the fact right now this was as feared a clutch hitter in his time as there was. And he stood about 5'7" and weighed 185 pounds. Squat little catcher. He looked and sounded like a New York guy, but he grew up in St. Louis. Just kind of an odd little character who could really, really change the baseball games that he played in for your New York Yankees.
It's interesting that you bring that up, Skip Bayless, because when I'm giving my speeches on the lecture circuit, I often say to folks, I'm brilliant. Because I know I'm not. I learn from those who are. And the fact of the matter is that when you said what you said about Yogi Berra and former Mayor Rudolph Giuliani came on our show and echoed your sentiments, the reality is that I was ignorant. I didn't know. When you hear stuff about Yogi Berra, I'm just reading stuff like now, 1946 to 1985, he appeared in 21 World Series. In 17
also as a coach and manager.
Yeah. All right,
that's staggering to me. 21 World
17-year period with the New York Yankees, 14 times. 14 times they won the American League pennant. When you look at that and some of the numbers that come associated with him, 358 home runs, drove in 1,430 runs, 1957 through 1959 won 148 consecutive games behind the plate without one error, which is just phenomenal. It was a Major League Baseball record at the time. For me personally, being due to the fact that I never saw Yogi Berra play, I just saw the highlights because I was born in 1967, so I never saw him play. I do remember him managing. I do remember him finishing in third place as a manager for the New York Yankees. I do remember George Steinbrenner guaranteeing him that he would stay on as the manager even if they started off slow, because you don't just get rid of Yogi Berra. But then after a slow start that following year, I believe it was 84, 85, Yogi Berra started off slow. They were in last place, 16 games in. George Steinbrenner goes back on his word and fired him.
And didn't fire him to his face. He sent Clyde King, the GM.
Clyde King, the general manager, to give Yogi Berra the news. And I remember saying to myself as a kid, who the hell does he think he is? You know, you're in last place. What's wrong with you? But when you grow up and get wisdom attached to you and realize that your word has to mean something, I still don't knock Steinbrenner for firing him. But if you have to go back on your word, we'll get on DeAndre Jordan in the modern day era for the Clippers for going back on his word to the Dallas Mavericks. We'll get on other guys for making their mistakes. Then that means we can't give the late George Steinbrenner, God rest his soul, a pass. Clyde King should have never went to Yogi Berra's office. That should have been George Steinbrenner. George Steinbrenner should have held that press conference and said, I went back on my word and I apologize for that. I have to do this. George Steinbrenner should have been man enough to address Yogi Berra with the deference and the respect that he deserves because of all of his years of labor to the New York Yankees. And the fact that George Steinbrenner didn't do that obviously was something that resonated with Yogi Berra, to the point where Yogi Berra, to my knowledge, didn't speak against him. He just wouldn't show up. He wouldn't show up to be honored. He wouldn't show up to Monument Park and receive any platitudes or anything like that. And ultimately, they mended fences years later, which obviously was the great thing to do, because he should always be celebrated as one of the all-time great Yankees for his contributions to the franchise. But more importantly, I respect him for clearly the honorable man that he proved to be. He didn't have to say anything, and he didn't. He just sat up there and said, I don't even think that he was mad for being fired. I think he was mad that George Steinbrenner went back on his word. It was the principle of it. It was the principle of his word. And so, you know, this was the 80s, and it's a little more than 20 years later, you know, close to 30 years. And principle is not something that we hear too much about. But Yogi Berra wasn't just a great Yankee. He wasn't just a winner. He wasn't just an all-star and a three-time league MVP and a guy that was inducted into baseball's Hall of Fame in 1972, I believe. He was a guy that was of incredible and immense principle. And I think on a day like today, that's what you got to remember about him just as much as anything.
I agree. And allow me to drive home my original point by pointing out another reason I was so offended that he became this sort of clownish persona in later years. As a catcher, he was known as a savant calling pitches for pitchers, and caught the one perfect game, as you remember, in the World Series, Don Larson's 1956 Game 5. And he validated his brilliance by, as managing the Mets. Do you remember this?
Took them to the World Series.
All the way to the World Series to play the Oakland A's that were just about invincible at that point. But he validated that this man had baseball brilliance about him, but kids today just know, oh, the funny little guy, the Yogiisms. Really?
Skip to that. I grew up watching Yankees games with my dad. He's a diehard all New York fan. And I wasn't aware of any of this, speaking for the millennials. I knew the Yogiisms, I knew the name, but in terms of the prowess that you're talking about and the 18-time All-Star, so I appreciate both of you guys sharing that.
God bless him.
God bless him.
Football's back, and it already feels like the playoffs thanks to 1 Week Fantasy at DraftKings.com. With millions of dollars in prizes being paid out each week, every play in every game could take you closer to a life-changing payday. Hurry to DraftKings.com now. Use promo code TAKE and play for free with your first deposit in this Sunday's $1 million fantasy contest. This isn't fantasy as usual. This is DraftKings. Welcome to the big time. Enter TAKE for free entry now only at DraftKings.com. That's DraftKings.com.
Let's focus on the other breaking news last night and the quarterback situation with America's team. We know Tony Romo is sidelined for about 7 games at least, so it's Brandon Weeden who will get the nod. And then yesterday, the Cowboys added another signal caller to the mix, acquiring Matt Castle from the Bills, who was beat out by Tyrod Taylor. Here's Jerry Jones on the situation.
He's a thing of beauty on throwing a football. His passing motion or his arm is, frankly, you won't see a more gifted passer. And power, accuracy, the entire aspect of it.
Okay, so as I was just saying earlier, Brandon Weeden's there. Now they bring in Matt Castle, who was acquired from the Bills. Tyrod Taylor took the job. Originally, he was with the Vikings prior. Skip, that's the backstory. Oh, let's go to Stephen A. I apologize. Stephen A., do you trust in the Cowboys situation?
Well, first of all, you have no choice but to, because it's a product of injuries. So certainly you don't want to sit there. It's not like they said Brandon Weeden, we're going to allow him to start over Tony Romo, because that would obviously be laughable. But because of the injured situation, and he is the backup, and plus, not only that, he works with the first team on Wednesdays, which is the day that Tony Romo takes off. You get all of that. Yep. The flip side to it, however, is I found Jerry Jones' comments just straight comedy, to be quite honest with you. The way he talked about Brandon, we really throw a football and all of this other stuff. Why? Because Jerry Jones, ever the salesman, is trying to sell everybody on Brandon Weeden and what he's going to do for the Cowboys, and then there's no reason for hopes to dissipate in any way, shape, form, or fashion. I find that to be comical. Brandon Weeden is 0-6 in his last 6 starts. His last game as a starting quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, he lost that game. His QBR was 15. This is Skip's favorite stat. I am correct in saying that, right? Your favorite stat is QBR.
You couldn't wait to share that 15 QBR. Be honest.
15.
You were excited to share that.
Wait, say it again. 15.
15. A QBR of 15.
On a scale of 0 to 100.
15.
So I just laugh about that. Now, I will say this. I wish him luck. I mean, the brother's birthday is on the same day as mine.
Oh, that
got something going on.
Okay.
And everyone will be in Cowboys gear again.
Whatever. The point is that, October 14th is a very, very special day. Very special individuals are born and raised on that day. Usher's birthday
Are you a
is the same
Libra?
as mine. Of course I am.
Oh, okay.
Usher's birthday is the same as mine. And look at how much of a star he is. I'm on First Take. We know what time it is here. Needless to say, we don't even have to go there. October 14th is a very, very special day. But I will tell you this, Brandon Weeden, it's not so much about him, Skip. It's about the weapons that he's not going to have available to him. That is what I believe could be somewhat problematic for him. I don't expect him to be great. I don't think greatness is in him. But I do expect him to be relatively decent and keep things somewhat interesting for the Dallas Cowboys. So I won't sit there and excoriate the man. I won't disrespect him. I would tell you that he's winless in his last 6 starts. The QBR before the 15, by the way, there was a QBR of 26 in the other 5 starts he had. So it's just not that impressive. We all know this. But he can throw the football. Yep. He is familiar with the system. He does practice with the first team on Wednesdays. Yep. And the combination of all of those things, I think, lends itself towards expecting a slightly better result than some critics would surmise about Brandon Weeden. But I don't expect him to knock my socks off in any way.
Weeden or Castle? Which way would you go?
I definitely go with Weeden over Castle. Well, Castle couldn't beat out Tyrod Taylor or E.J. Manuel. That's number one. Number two, he hasn't done anything in the NFL since his one season when Tom Brady went down in Game 1 against Kansas City back in 2008.
In Kansas City.
No, I'm just saying, he won 10 in Kansas City one year, but I've never been sold on Matt Castle. I'm not sold on him now. He's definitely a viable backup to Weeden. In light of the fact that Tony Romo is out, I do agree with that. But outside of that, there's nothing about Matt Castle that moves me. So I don't have a problem with Weeden being designated ahead of him.
There we agree. Where I disagree with you is in your view of Brandon Weeden. I like Brandon Weeden a lot. And I'm not being a hypocrite about this. This isn't 20/20 hindsight. I liked him a lot before he was drafted. Unfortunately, by the same Cleveland Browns that drafted Johnny Manziel at 22, same spot.
How funny.
And I believe what happened to Brandon Weeden in Cleveland is Manziel all over again. Wrong place, wrong time, another regime that was about to be completely blown out. You're not going to have much of a shot. Now, why did I love Brandon Weeden? And by the way, I'm going to be on record here. I believe Brandon Weeden is good enough and now comfortable enough in a system that he's been in finally for 2 years under Scott Linehan, We saw the fruits of that when he went 7 for 7 at Philadelphia. While that game was still teetering, it was still a losable game. If he'd gone in and stunk it up with a QBR of 15 in that game at Philadelphia, they would have lost. But they won when obviously he hit Terrence Williams. Byron Maxwell just watched as he ran to the end zone, and that was the ball game. But I'm going to be on record here. I believe Brandon Weeden is good enough to beat Matt Ryan and the Atlanta Falcons and to go to Drew Brees, who has an arm issue, as his New Orleans Saints have unfathomably fallen all the way to 30th in our ESPN power rankings. Are you kidding me? I think Brandon Weeden with this Cowboy team is good enough to win the next 2 games for my Dallas Cowboys, right?
Yep.
Okay, now, when we go back to his last year at Oklahoma State, why did I love him going into the draft? Do you realize he went head-to-head with Robert Griffin III that year and outplayed him and beat him? And he went head-to-head with Ryan Tannehill, another first-rounder to be, first-round pick, head-to-head in College Station, outplayed him and beat him. He went head-to-head with Andrew Luck in the Fiesta Bowl. You could argue on outplayed, but he won the game in overtime, and I thought he played great in that game. 3 touchdowns to 1 interception. Luck had 2 to 1 interception. But it was the stats you could argue either way. But I thought Brandon stood up to Andrew Luck and ultimately won the game and outplayed him. He also beat Nick Foles that year and Landry Jones that year. So he had credentials to me. Now to what Jerry Jones said. You thought it was straight comedy? I thought it was straight truth. Jerry used the wrong word. He's
then
not,
it wasn't straight truth.
Okay, you won't see a more gifted passer, said Jerry Jones. If he had used the word thrower, it would have worked, because Brandon Weeden is a gifted thrower of the football. When you talk about passer of the football, now you're talking about reading defenses, hanging in the pocket under pressure, making the right choice, getting rid of the ball, blah, 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 accuracy, all those things. But just on winging the football, he can make every throw, and he throws a sweet football. And by the way, your Yankees once upon a time drafted him in the 2nd round out of Edmond Santa Fe High School.
Means nothing to me. He elected to go football.
No, he didn't. He went to play baseball for like 4 or 5 years.
Did he play for the Yankees?
Yeah, played in the minor leagues.
Well, that's what I said.
Okay. Well, you tried.
They
picked him. They made him a bonus,
let me tell you something. I don't know one single individual in the Yankees minor league system. When you ain't a Yankee until you make it up to the majors.
But at one point, they thought he was good enough.
Again. Okay, I don't count minor leaguers as a Yankee. Let's be clear about that. That's number 1. And number 2, Skip Bayless, let's also be clear about something here. You are a bit hypocritical. Allow me to explain to you why that is.
You better be good here.
Because you said it's not revisionist history. You were a supporter of Brandon Weeden coming out of college. Here's why you're hypocritical. Because with everybody else, QBR means everything to you. Why wouldn't it mean that much with Brandon Weeden? Now, I understand your explanations, but that reeks of hypocrisy, because when I see a guy with 5 starts in 2013 with a QBR that's at 24, I was wrong, I said 26, it was 24. Okay, the QBR is 24, all right? And then you follow that up with the following year with a QBR of 15, and Skip Bayless religiously lives. I have been up here, literally on many occasions, pointing to my computer. I have been up here pointing to quarterback rating, and you have repeatedly said means nothing to me. I'm all about QBR. Am I right about that, Molly?
QBR is his favorite stat.
No. When I ask you a question, my dear, a yes or no will suffice. Is it not true that Skip Bayless has shoved aside quarterback ratings in favor of QBR? Yes or no, Molly? Oh, my goodness. You're unbelievable.
Let me answer. Yes.
QBR. Unbelievable.
And your point is what?
Molly.
And your point is what?
My point is, if QBR means everything with everybody else, why is it that it does not? Hold on. You brought up QBR when it came to Tim Tebow in the 4th quarter against Aaron Rodgers. How are you going to ignore QBR when it comes to Brandon Weeden?
You know what?
How?
I don't have time to do this right now, but if I did look up his 4th quarter QBR in Cleveland and those rookie year starts I think you would be very impressed with it.
I'm just
because There's a good story in USA Today
I read it.
His current
I read
coordinator.
it. I read it. It's
Mark
right here.
Whipple was his coordinator that year. He's now the head coach at UMass.
Mark Whipple.
Okay.
Repeat that last name.
Mark Whipple.
I never heard of him, but go ahead. Go ahead.
He raves about what Brandon did that year with obviously a bad football team. And he threw late passes that were dropped against Indianapolis, against Baltimore, and he took Dallas all the way to overtime at Dallas. He had some big games. He threw for 322 at Cincinnati, 364 at the Raiders. He could wing the football for a bad football team.
No disrespect to Whipple. What is that? What his name is?
Yeah.
Whipple.
Yeah.
Okay. No disrespect to Whipple. Where's Whipple at right now?
He's the head coach at UMass.
UMass. NFL. UMass. Come on now. I don't want to hear that because, listen, here's my thing. And it's not to disrespect Whipple. I'm sure that he's a good man and I'm sure that he's going to be a good coach. Here's my issue. I don't take those quotes seriously because if Brandon Weeden stunk up the joint, would there be an article in USA Today of Coach Whipple talking about how he stunk? No. You just want to say something when there's something complimentary to say, or you want to sit there and pump them up. The fact remains is that most of us who have seen Brandon Weeden understand that he is a backup for a reason. And so because of that, all I'm saying is, look, he's surrounded by some good dudes who can play, who are tried and proven, especially if Jason Witten is out there. That's going to be a huge help to him this weekend. But in the end, a quarterback rating of 24 in his 5 starts in 2013 and 15 in his lone start last year with an 0-6 record in his last 6 starts as a quarterback, all right, does not bode well for your guy.
Okay.
These are facts.
Okay, here's my fact.
Okay.
He came in for Tony Romo in relief, made 4 out of 6 throws for 69 yards against Washington. Remember, Romo hurt his back?
Yeah.
Then the next week, he had to start against Todd Bowles' defense at Jerry World. Arizona was on a roll, especially defensively, at 6-1 at that point. They threw, as you would say, the kitchen sink at Brandon Weeden. He did not handle it well. He stunk it up. For reasons I cannot explain, he never clicked with Dez. They couldn't get on the same page. Well, guess what? Dez isn't there anymore.
So let me get this straight. You're saying he couldn't click with Dez. So the fact that Dez Bryant, who you have proclaimed to be the best wide receiver in all of football, is not there, that's going to be a good thing for Brandon Weeden? You're unbelievable.
Well,
I mean, you're the best. I concede that you're the best. You just said that. No. You just looked on national television and said the best wide receiver in football who is gone because of a broken foot is a good thing for the backup quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. So in other words,
you know why?
So in other words,
let me educate you about football. The game you have you struggle to grasp.
All right, no problem. No problem. You can take those shots. It's all right.
If you go out against Arizona and you get Dez-centric and you say, I got to get it to him. I got to get it to him. Wait, is he there? Is he there? Is he there? And you start forcing passes to him that get intercepted, that's a bad thing.
Hold on, wait a minute.
But if you start spreading the ball around.
Tell me, who can't comprehend that? But here's the reality, Skip Bayless. If Dez Bryant is the best and Brandon Weeden has the skill sets and, more importantly, the IQ and the acumen you proclaim he has. I'm sorry. You can't figure out that it ain't got nothing to do with reps. You just finished saying
last year he wasn't getting any reps.
You just finished saying from a mental perspective you feel compelled to try and get to Dez Bryant. He doesn't have the intelligence, the intestinal wherewithal to sit there and say, well, you know what? I may not need to be so transparent and obvious in targeting this one receiver. I might need to get it to the open man. You trying to tell me he doesn't have the intelligence to figure that out? And you're confident in him as the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys?
7 for 7 against the Eagles you picked to win the division.
An Eagles team that doesn't seem to be a team who I would not be surprised.
Don't look at me.
Hold on, wait a minute. Well, look, don't look at me when you're talking about the Redskins. They weren't much of a defense, according to you at the time, that he went up against them. All right? But
they were killing Tony Romo.
We have to take a break. But we're going to continue with the Cowboys when we come back. And one thing I want to know from both of you.
You don't need to continue with the Cowboys?
We do.
Why?
There's a new receiver coming to town, maybe, for Dez Bryant. I want to know how many games they need to win.
To do what?
To be okay.
To win the division?
With Brandon Weeden. How many can Brandon pull off? And how many do they need to be okay?
I'm already on record. I'm giving him a shot to win the next 2. And that would go a long ways. If you're 4-0, you got a shot.
They're going to be out anywhere from 7 to 8 weeks. Tony Romo's going to probably miss a minimum of 8 games. I'd say Brandon Weeden will probably go 4-4.
Okay.
Well, I would take that.
I think the Cowboys are going to. All they got to do to win the division is go 7-7 the rest of the way.
All right.
500 football.
4-4, so they'd be 6-4 when Romo came back. I'd take that.
Terrell Owens, who hasn't played in a game since 2010, went on the Rich Eisen show, shout out to Rich, and said that he has had his people call the Cowboys to see if they were interested in Owens returning to the team.
I'm not sure what the situation is. I think there are, my name may have come up in discussion as far as bringing me in. But again, a lot of people are going to factor in my age as far as why I can't play. We all know what happened when I was there, and there were some things said where it kind of maybe fractured, the relationship between myself and Witten and Romo. And again, time has passed, and hopefully, they know that I've moved on beyond that, and maybe, hopefully, they have. But for me, it's all about giving, myself an opportunity. That's all I ever really wanted.
Stephen A., 41-year-old Terrell Owens, what's your take?
If you're looking at his birth certificate, it's absolutely ridiculous that he should be in the NFL. If you know T.O., if you see what type of shape he keeps himself in, way he takes care of himself, his body, et cetera, I definitely think you should give him a look. I definitely think you should give him an opportunity, a chance. If you're the Dallas Cowboys, one would argue that you're in the midst of a Super Bowl run. You simply can't take that risk because it's not like Dez is not coming back this season. Dez is expected to be back. So if you're asking yourself the questions, well, what would we do with T.O. then? Of course, it makes sense not to bring him on board. If Dez is not going to come back, then again, you ask yourself, why not give him a chance? So it sounds like it's all over the place because it's so conditional when you look at T.O. as to what situation he should be invited into in terms of being given a chance to really show up. Here's my thing, Skip. I have a very, very sympathetic side towards Terrell Owens. Here is why. He's made a lot of mistakes. Folks, you called them, team obliterator. Team obliterator, yeah. And, terrible Owens at times.
No, I didn't say that.
You didn't say that one?
No.
That wasn't you?
No.
Yeah, but I know you said team obliterator. That's your coin.
I use Neo occasionally instead of Tio.
That's right.
Yep.
For me, there's no disputing what kind of effect he's had on locker rooms. But I've always been opposed to how premature his career ended. This guy, 15,934 yards, 153 touchdowns in his career, 1,078 receptions. When he retired, when he left the game, rather, he was second all-time to Jerry Rice in those categories. When you talk about three of the most elite receivers in NFL history, there's usually a discussion involving him, Randy Moss, and Jerry Rice. And I just look at it from the standpoint that regardless of the mistakes that he made, I just look at those who have been given other chances in the NFL. And I know this may not have anything to do with T.O. per se, but my God, when we see what has transpired over the last several years and guys who have been given other opportunities just to resurrect their career or to go out the way their numbers and their stature says they deserve to go out, I am just of the mindset that I would love to see him back in the game, just getting the chance. I didn't realize the last time he played was in 2010 in Cincinnati. 11, I'm just looking at it right now. 72 receptions, 983 yards. And then, with Seattle, he was in training camp and ultimately got let go. I don't think that was because he dropped a couple of passes, because I saw him catch a couple of good ones, too. I think that was primarily a product of the fact that it was a relatively young team with Russell Wilson and those boys, and you couldn't risk having T.O. with a young quarterback. I think that's what Pete Carroll was thinking. That's probably true. But I'm just of the mindset that it would really, really be nice. The circumstances have to be ideal, and I understand that. But it would really be nice for him to depart from the game on a higher note than he departed from, because I think he deserves more than that.
I'm going to concede 1 point to you, and only 1 point. I have no doubt that Terrell is in phenomenal condition right now. I have no doubt that if you threw him into Sunday's game against the Falcons at Jerry World, I think he could produce a little bit. Not a lot, but a little bit. He could help. I have no doubt about that. The reason I can't abide your word nice is because I still haven't quite gotten over what he did to this football team at the end in 2009. The reason I called him Team Obliterator, and the reason I've told you repeatedly I don't want to see him in the Hall of Fame, is because he didn't tear apart 1 or 2 teams, 3 teams, including the 3rd team, the Dallas Cowboys. Again, I'm a lifelong Cowboy fan. For a while, I was a big T.O. fan when I was in San Francisco, and he was playing for the 49ers. He's taken a lot of shots at me lately, and he's welcome to do that.
Lately?
Because, yeah, he has.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, I'm an idiot now, but that's okay. He's called me an idiot a few times. But I deserve that because I've taken shots, so he can take his, and I'm fine with that. This isn't personal on that account, but it is personal on this account. Do you remember how badly it ended with these Dallas Cowboys of Tony Romo and Jason Witten? Do you remember that when Terrell was released in March after 2009?
8, I believe.
After...
It says here 8. His last season was 2008 when he had 1,052 yards. That March.
But in right. that March,
gotcha.
Yeah.
March 2009.
Yeah, he said that he was quoted as saying that Tony Romo definitely had a hand in his release, meaning he wanted him out. Repeatedly, Terrell dropped hints to the media about how Romo favored Jason Witten too much, to a fault. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And he had a shouting match with Todd Haley, who was then he was an assistant coach in Dallas at that point, and they got into it, and that led to Jason Witten and Terrell, I was told, getting face-to-face into it and having to be separated before a practice one day in Dallas. It got that bad. So given all that backdrop, given the fact that a very talented Dallas team crumbled at the end of that year, losing 3 of its last 4. And you remember what happened at Philadelphia in the final regular season game that year as they missed the playoffs? They lost 44-7 because they had been torn apart internally, I think, foremost by one T.O. He split that locker room the way he split locker rooms, I thought, in San Francisco and Philadelphia. My point is, there was so much bad blood that to have the audacity to think that you could make a call to Jerry Jones and say, hey, remember me, I'm available, is mind-blowing to me. That you would want to go back with that quarterback and that tight end, who, by the way, is still pretty good. I would have to say Jason Witten is pretty good. And obviously they are best friends. They've been best friends from the start, so it's hard to break that apart. But does Tony Romo favor Jason Witten? Oh, maybe positively he favors him. I mean, it's not a bad thing to throw him the ball every once in a while, especially in the last play of the game against your New York Giants on opening Sunday night. So my point is, Jerry Jones loved Terrell. He brought him there. It was Jerry's choice, not Bill Parcells' choice. It was Jerry's, and he's got a soft spot just the way you have for Terrell. And I'm sure in his heart of hearts, if he could make it happen, it would be a great thing to have him back in the fold. But I don't think Tony Romo and Jason Witten would be real happy about it. So that's all that would matter to me at this point.
Well, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that Terrell Owens should be brought back in spite of them. I'm saying that if they were willing to forgive and forget, or rather forgive and move on, does the man deserve a chance? And I'm not trying to really get into it too heavily. I have a soft spot for anybody that produced on the level that Terrell Owens produced and is ostracized from the game. I remember having a soft spot for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who's the greatest big man ever and a 6-time NBA champion. And people thought that he was difficult to have around as a coach.
But did he tear apart the Lakers?
I'm just saying some of the things that are said about him.
No,
I'm just making the point that I have been on record saying I don't care about that. When you have somebody that contributes as much to the game as they have, you have to find a place for them. And not even, with Terrell Owens, you may not have to find a place for him at age 41 as a player. But people act like this dude should be, just ostracized from the game of football forever. Terrell Owens made a lot of mistakes. But you have a lot of people in those locker rooms who sided with him for a reason. Here's the biggest problem with Terrell Owens. He never lied. He told the truth. He just didn't know how to keep his mouth shut and get along for the better of the team. When he felt emotional about something, he was going to express himself. So again,
he told the truth as he viewed it, as he saw it.
Well, as he viewed, but I never heard anybody say he's lying. I've heard people saying there's more to it than his emotions will allow him to acknowledge. But I never once heard anybody say that he was lying. What they got on him about is that he would say stuff that obviously was in violation of, quote unquote, the code. But Terrell Owens didn't reveal anything about other people's business. He revealed stuff about his own, what problems he was going through with somebody. I don't think in today's day, when we see some of the issues, when some of the people that are brought back into the league, that's a reason for this guy to be ostracized. Dallas is not the right situation in all likelihood for him. But I think he should get a chance to contribute to the NFL in some capacity, considering his greatness throughout the years.
And as far as we know, he has not been brought in by Dallas, just made the call, his representatives, to the Cowboys organization. After a heated battle throughout training camp and now 3 games into the season, Ohio State still hasn't definitively settled on a full-time starting quarterback. Apparently, Urban Meyer doesn't think Cardale Jones or J.T. Barrett have done enough to earn that distinction. Stephen A., what should Urban Meyer do here?
Keep Cardale Jones in the lineup. That's all. It's just that simple to me. Yeah, he wasn't that impressive. He went 4-9 through 2 interceptions. We understand that, but the entire team looked ill-prepared to play football Saturday against Northern Illinois. Let's just call it what it is. I think this particular struggle was on Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer, we know to be an exceptional coach, a great coach, champion multiple times over. We know what this man's resume entails, but I thought Saturday afternoon's performance, this team didn't seem as prepared as I'm accustomed to seeing his teams be. J.T. Barrett can play. We all know that J.T. Barrett had a sensational season prior to going down before Cardale Jones ended up coming in and shellacking Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game and then the national semifinal. They obviously won before beating Oregon for the national championship. They beat Alabama in the national semifinal. Cardale Jones was the quarterback for all 3 of those games. And coming into this season, we know they intend for this to be his last. And then J.T. Barrett could come in there and take over the helm then. It's a good problem to have. If he's playing like garbage, you pull him out and you put J.T. Barrett in like you're doing now. But I don't think you change the formula. Cardale Jones needs to stay the starting quarterback for the Ohio State Buckeyes.
I don't like your formula.
Why is that?
If he plays like garbage, you yank him?
That's all.
Okay, so
that's anybody. I feel that way about anybody, pro or college.
I'm putting Saturday on Urban Meyer for a very different reason than you are.
Please.
You want to talk about a quick hook? He yanked Cardale Jones, and we both agree that Cardale should be the starter. He yanked him in the second quarter after he'd thrown 9 passes, which included obviously 2 interceptions against Northern Illinois at home. You cannot do that to a quarterback. It's the hardest position, as I think you would agree with me, to play in all of sports. Confidence is the utmost of the requirements, and you can't look over your shoulder thinking that your head coach is going to yank you in favor of somebody who has had a whole lot of success playing that position last year for your football team for an extended period of time in J.T. Barrett. So you have to, with conviction, go with one or the other. And if he plays like garbage into the second quarter, you have to let him play his way out of the garbage. Because I'm here to say that game ended up 20-13. If he had stuck with Cardale, I think Cardale would have figured it out and they would have won much. It would have been 30-13.
Well, my retort to that, Skip Bayless, would be this. If J.T. Barrett were the starting quarterback instead of Cardale Jones, and he did the same thing, then Urban Meyer would have yanked him for Cardale Jones. The reason being is that the way this situation is structured at this particular moment in time, Urban Meyer had a very unique and great problem to have. Braxton Miller is a Heisman candidate. He goes down. J.T. Barrett comes in. He's playing lights out. Then he goes down. Then Cardale Jones comes in and he handles his business and delivers a national championship. Then they turn around after all of that. Okay, and what happens? What transpires? You got all 3 wanting to come back this year, and Braxton Miller is willing to play wide receiver. And so when you look at it from that perspective, it's clearly obvious. It's obvious and clear that Urban Meyer knows what the situation is, and so do the quarterbacks. There's no definitive one guy that you're going to leave in there no matter what. It's not because you just lost confidence in him. It's because you believe in both that much. So when one is having a relatively bad day, you can bring in the next guy because you have no doubt that they're going to be able to produce. This is not an ordinary quarterback situation.
Okay, but you can't play musical quarterbacks with those two.
What I'm saying to you is that Urban Meyer clearly walked into this season with that idea in mind, and they all knew that was going to be the MO because of their situation. It was very, very unique. So because of their situation, both of them knew at any given moment you could be yanked in favor of the other. Cardale Jones is just there trying to learn how to be a better quarterback to elevate himself to the next level. And J.T. Barrett is trying to make sure that he continues to build off of last season. Under normal circumstances, you're absolutely right. I'm just sitting there and saying that this is an extreme aberration. This is not normal. And both quarterbacks understood that, and Urban Meyer understood that.
Okay,
if he had given the ball to Ezekiel Elliott more, this wouldn't have even been an issue.
Okay, but after the game, I think Urban Meyer even came to the conclusion he had messed this one up. He said after the game, maybe I should pick one. And I define picking one the way he's saying it, and he's going to do it today, as picking and sticking. Where once he names, if it's Cardale, I hope it is for his sake, he will stick with it. He won't have a short leash the way he did.
Maybe the leash was too shorter. Maybe it was. Maybe it was too short, but I do understand the situation.
Well, we'll find out later today, and they host Western Michigan Saturday at the Shoe. Looking forward to seeing that game.
And now, for Geico's edition of Stuff Found in Your Car, we go inside your side door pocket.
Hello, yes, the crumpled receipt with gum in it. From your anniversary dinner, you sprang for expensive wine, your server was Beth. That dinner was a couple $100. Money you could get back if you switched to Geico and saved hundreds of dollars on your car insurance. I bet you'd save that receipt. Frame it even. But really, where did I go wrong? Was it the corkage fee?
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit geico.com today.
After skipping all of training camp, the preseason, and the first two regular season games, Seahawks safety Kam Chancellor has given up his holdout and will return to Seattle. This according to our very own Stephen A. Smith. Stephen A. received a text message from Kam this morning that said the following: I'm going to go help my teammates that are understanding of my position and the ones who aren't. God forgives all. Why can't I? Time to help us get back to the big dance. I can address business after the season. Me and Marshawn started a mission 2 years ago. I can't let my dog down. Real talk. We welcome now Hall of Famer Jerome Bettis to the desk. Good morning. Good to see you.
Thank you.
I should say good afternoon this time of day. What does Kam mean to the Seahawks, Jerome?
Well, he's the glue that kind of brings this defense together. You've got to have, on defense, you've got to have that emotional player that is the thumper, because he brings that energy and that excitement to the defensive side. When you get that big hit and all those guys rally around that, he's usually the one that's giving the big hit. So when you don't have a guy like that, then everybody's running around and they're going through the motions, but they don't have the same intensity. So when you have a guy like Kam Chancellor in there, in the lineup, he's directing traffic, letting all the guys know where to be, because he's the intermediary between the secondary and the linebacker, because he's part linebacker, part safety, part cornerback. So he has the ability to really talk to both sides, and when he's out there, they all gravitate to him. So when you have a player like that, he's missing, then there's a lot missing with the defense. So now you insert him back in, you should see an uptick in that defense in terms of their energy and how they go out there and play the game.
Well, Jerome brought up part linebacker, part safety, part corner. That's a lot of areas to cover.
Yes.
When you combine that with the fact that he's the captain, that he's the hit man, that he's the emotional leader, and he's the quarterback of the defense, then that is how you have the Legion of Boom. When Marshawn Lynch's mama ends her Facebook post by saying boom, it says it all when she's calling for folks to be fired. I mean, everywhere you turned, it was clear that he was missed by this team, not to mention the fact that they've been a #1 ranked defense in the NFL the last 3 years. Not one, not two, all the last 3 years. They are now ranked 29th. 29th.
29th.
So you went from number 1 to number 29.
That is crazy.
I think you got to pay attention to something like that, okay? So then I look at it from that perspective. You went from number 1 to number 29. You talk about being a linebacker, safety, corner, depending on the play. You talk about being the quarterback of the defense. You're talking about galvanizing the troops. You're talking about all of these different things. It speaks to the level of importance that he has for this team. Where he's going to have a significant challenge, however, is he's going to have to shove all of those other emotions aside. Because considering what he said, John Snyder said to him, I'm not taking care of you this year, next year, or the year after. And then you combine that with the fact that he believes that Pete Carroll had a lot to do with that. You got to shove aside all of that to just focus and go out and play. I have no doubt that he could do it on Sundays. The challenge for him is going to be, what do you do on those days in between those games when you clearly have to deal with these individuals? Because in order for you to lead, you're going to have to shove all of that aside all year, not just on game days.
I have no doubt that Cam is the quarterback and the enforcer of this defense. But you two are heaping lots of expectations on him to be the difference maker, to walk back into that locker room and step onto that field and become the Super Bowl catalyst. If I can do a quick shout out to Allen Iverson, your man, the answer to the rest of this season for the Seattle Seahawks. Is that where we're heading with this?
Well,
is going to change life?
What I would say to you, Skip, is that we're not looking, and I'm going to speak for Jerome here, I don't think you're looking at Kam Chancellor, the individual, to be that player on the field, and that makes up for everything. Of course, he can only do what he can do. But if you're one of those dudes that can galvanize the troops around you, you understand? And peel the greatness out of them that's in them, that wasn't being peeled out of them by anybody else, then that goes a long way. The question is, can Kam Chancellor help the rest of the Legion of Boom to be the Legion of Boom?
Okay.
I believe that. Now, if you're saying to me, can Kam Chancellor go out there as a free safety corner, linebacker, and do it all himself? No. But last time I checked, Earl Thomas was still on that squad. Bobby Wagner was still on that squad. Richard Sherman was still on that squad. Bennett and those boys are still on that squad. You understand? And oh, by the way, when we talk about the Legion of Boom, we're talking about dudes other than the front four. Because the front four detest the fact that the Legion of Boom gets all the credit, and they don't. So who do you think spearheads that competition? Because Kam Chancellor's the one that sits there and says, all right, we'll go out there and do something about it.
Okay.
Do something about it so the Legion of Boom don't have to be the Legion of Boom.
Quick question for this man. Hall of Fame running back that you are.
Yeah, Hall of Fame.
Speaking of great running backs, remember what happened to Emmitt Smith in 1993? Do you remember this? You were around?
Yeah.
Cowboys, defending Super Bowl champs. Emmitt holds out. And this is the first 2 games as they fall to 0-2. Charles Haley, after the second loss at home to Buffalo, throws a tantrum in the locker room and blasts a hole in the locker room wall with his helmet right in front of Jerry Jones, who said, I give up. I will concede and sign this man and bring him back. Emmitt Smith becomes regular season MVP of the NFL that year, on to Super Bowl MVP that year. Can Kam Chancellor be Emmitt Smith?
He can be Emmitt Smith, not in the production and expecting him to be the defensive MVP of the NFL, but he can be that catalyst, because now what happens as a football player, if I'm Bobby Wagner, I'm saying, okay, Cam is here, my guy is here, I can take a chance because I know he's here and he can back me up. So now all of these guys are playing a lot different because their guy is there. So when your guy is not there, you're saying, okay, I have to be perfect because I don't want to put any pressure on the backup. So now you're going to play it straight. Whereas if you know Cam is there, you say, okay, I can take a chance. I see something, I can take a chance and go after it. And when you have a defense that's more aggressive in taking those chances, then you're going to get a better outcome at the end of the day. So that's what I'm saying. When you have a guy like Kam Chancellor there, he makes everybody better, and everybody gets excited, and that defense becomes an explosive defense as opposed to a waiting on your heels.
I got all that. I still don't think a great safety can have quite the impact a great running back can have.
No. Okay? He won't. But he will impact that defense that needs something.
Well, Stephen A's back on board.
I never jumped off. I never jumped off.
Yeah.
I've always thought Seattle was going to the...
I think you were teetering.
No, because I knew Cam was going to come back.
Okay.
Playing in place of Josh McCown, who was out because of a concussion, Johnny Manziel led Cleveland to a 28-14 win over Tennessee. That led many people to wonder what would happen when McCown came back. Well, we have that answer. Josh McCown will start ahead of Johnny Manziel this Sunday when the Raiders come to town. That after McCown passing the NFL's protocol on concussions. Jerome Bettis is still here. Jerome, what does this mean for Johnny?
Actually, you may think I'm crazy. I think this is great for Johnny. Everybody's saying, oh, man, Johnny's going back to a backup. You have to understand, part of this could be a test. They want to see how are you going to respond, okay, because you're this new Johnny Manziel. How are you going to respond going back to the number 2 position after you had a good game? That's part of it, one, okay? Can he be this veteran guy that he's claiming to be now, okay, and not this young, immature football player that he's once been? So now that's part of the process. But the other part is he's still developing as a quarterback. So now what you see that the things that you've given him in the offseason, they're paying off. They're working. So let's continue to develop him, continue to work with him. He doesn't know all of the nuances of the NFL, of the quarterback position. So now you're giving him a chance, and he's watching it, and now he's going to be a lot more invested in what's going on because he had an opportunity to play, and now he's going to make sure he's ready because he understands that he's a play away, and it gives the public an opportunity to now, like Johnny Manziel again. Because right now in Cleveland, no one really likes Johnny Manziel. So now you get this good game out of him. Now the public goes into his favor. And the biggest part of all of this is Johnny Manziel's confidence. Now you get his confidence at a sky high. You take him off the field. You put him back in a learning situation. And now he's going to soak up and want to learn more because he thinks inside, you know what? I'm ready. I know I can do this.
That winning is contagious.
Because at the end of last season, he said some things about, well, if I can't get better, if I can't do it, I need to find something else to do. That is a sign that there's no confidence there as a football player. So now you're building his confidence, okay? You're building his resume. You're building his fan support. You're doing all these positive things, and he's learning at the same time. And you give yourself an opportunity to bring him off the bench as a spark plug if you need him. So I think this is nothing but a positive situation for Johnny Manziel, as long as he sees it that way and still understands that he has a great opportunity to get better.
You buying that?
Hey, I'll buy it. He has to see it as an opportunity to get better. I think he will, because I think the presence of McCown helps that. If you had a quarterback that wasn't willing to help you, that was experienced enough and wasn't willing to share those experiences with you and help guide you to elevate you, that would be different. But the fact that you're playing behind a quarterback that's willing to do that for you, I think goes a long way to facilitating Johnny Manziel's growth. And I think as long as he sees that, he's willing to learn. Because I think that, you got to remember, this would be far more difficult for him if it was the Johnny Manziel straight out of Texas A&M, who never played in the NFL, who believed he was it, and who was this guy. But the fact that he struggled the way that he struggled last year, went through what he went through, plus had the off-season or off-the-field issues that he had, I think that that's humbled him to a point where somebody is gracious. From just from a human perspective, as Josh McCown is, I think that helps Johnny Manziel immensely.
But Jerome, back to your point about how nobody in Cleveland likes Johnny right now, I think if you left this to a fan vote, Johnny would win the starting job against the Oakland Raiders this Sunday. You disagree with that?
No, I believe he possibly will, but that's that one game, we love you, and then you have a bad game, and then you go back to the bottom of the heap.
Look. Do I think this current regime, featuring Mike Pettin and Ray Farmer, do I think that they believe they have a little better chance to beat the Oakland Raiders with Josh McCown than Johnny Manziel? I believe that. I believe they would like Josh to play every game from here on out through the rest of this year because they think Josh could save their jobs better than Johnny could save their jobs at this point in Johnny's growth. I said this to start the show, and I'm going to stick by it. On draft night, Patton and Farmer were not remotely on board with even drafting Johnny Manziel. So when the owner overrules you and the quarterback coach is on your side, he's no longer there. He's been replaced. It's a bad situation from jump because you're with two guys who are the two primary football decision makers who do not believe in you and your very unusual skill set. And as I always say, you either gulp the Johnny Kool-Aid or you're going to spit it out because it's going to have a bitter taste to you because it is completely unconventional. I think it makes them nervous. Josh McCown makes them very comfortable. So I'm not surprised they went back to Josh, though I think the fans, especially the season ticket holders, would rather lose with Johnny than lose with Josh because it's just a lot more fun. It's a lot more fun to watch, right? So they're doing what they need to do to save their jobs, which I don't think will get saved at all. I think this will be their last year, one and done this year.
So do you think, let me ask you this question, do you think it's beneficial for Johnny Manziel to go back to the backup role? Like I said, earlier, I think it's a benefit, big benefit to him as the backup now.
The only reason I can see some positive there is this is the worst supporting cast offensively in the National Football League. No joke.
Yeah.
Isaiah Crowell, really? I mean, seriously?
He did average more than 4 yards a carry, though.
He's okay, but he's not Jerome Bettis, right?
Yeah.
He's not Emmitt Smith. There's no difference maker. I like Travis Benjamin a lot. He can fly, but he is not a difference-making receiver, and he's the best of the bunch. The rest of them are all undrafted, unnameable type receivers. And your offensive line has a great left tackle, and the rest of them are turnstiles all down the line. So you're going to be running for your life. And God bless Josh McCown because, you saw what he did. He vaults into the end zone, helicopters into the end zone, and got concussed. He's just trying to score, just trying to survive. They're all trying to survive. I hope Johnny winds up somewhere else. That's just me because I think this is an unwinnable situation in Cleveland.
All I know is if Josh struggles on Sunday against the Raiders, we'll be hearing the Johnny chants.
Oh, yeah.
The backup quarterback quickly becomes the favorite.
And you know what? The Raiders are no joke to me. They're going to cause problems for everybody
I wanted
they play.
to mention that. I'm surprised. I'm pleasantly surprised at what I'm seeing from the Raiders. They don't seem as pathetic.
After the first game, everybody kind of ripped them.
Derek Carr was taking the draft later than Johnny Manziel.
He was.
Let's see what he does. Let's see what Amari Cooper does.
Yep.
Well, Manny Pacquiao recovers from surgery. Top-ranked promoter one Bob Arum is working on his return to the ring. Arum told ESPN.com on Monday that Pacquiao will be back in February or March, but no later than the second week of April, he promises. Skip, what do you expect from your boy moving forward? He wants to fight a lot.
Stephen A. Smith, obviously my man Manny Pacquiao is coming off very serious rotator cuff surgery, and clearly he suffered said injury 3 weeks before he fought Floyd Mayweather Jr., so he fought with basically one arm tied behind his back, and I still thought he won that fight on points because Floyd ran and ran and ducked and ran and ran and ran and ducked some more. We know that. So now Floyd Mayweather Jr. has retired after he, quote-unquote, fought Andre Berto. Well, I can guarantee you Manny Pacquiao will not fight any Andre Bertos as he rebuilds himself toward fighting condition and will then challenge Floyd again. But obviously Floyd is now retired, so he will run and duck into retirement, and I don't think he'll ever fight again because Floyd would be afraid to fight a Manny with two arms instead of one.
Well, Manny Pacquiao will come back to the game of boxing. I mean, he is obviously one of the great ones. Here's hoping he doesn't get put to sleep. It doesn't look like if he overdosed on Ambien. Let's make sure that nothing like that happens to him. David Garcia, I still think is probably a little bit too small for him. Keith Thurman is a fight that I would like to see. I'd like to see him fight a Canelo Alvarez or a rematch with a Freddie Roach-trained Miguel Cotto. Who will Freddie Roach pick in that particular situation to train? Manny Pacquiao, I have no doubt, will be even better because after getting schooled on the art of boxing, like Floyd Money Mayweather has done,
one arm?
I really believe
How do you
that
school
now,
a one-arm fighter?
I really believe that now, since he'll have guys that can't evade his punches and make him miss 400 times the way Floyd did, I think Manny Pacquiao will actually be great again.
Yeah,
because
I agree.
He won't be
He'll
able
fight legitimate fighters.
He'll be able to hit other dudes. Couldn't hit Floyd.
We'll see. You know what I'm excited for? Tomorrow, we have a great debate on the show. Who is truly America's team? The Yanks, the Cowboys?
That's
Do you have
a joke.
others?
It's a joke.
Weigh in. We want to hear from you. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Catch First Take weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific on ESPN2.
Last week, Julie Carroll posted a status that read, "Just had the most delicious banana ever." It got 2 likes and 4 comments. Well, Julie, Geico also wants to make a comment. What if we told you in as little as 15 minutes you could save hundreds of dollars on your car insurance by switching to Geico? With those hundreds of dollars, we bet you can find another banana equally, if not more delicious than the one you had last week. Hashtag go bananas, hashtag savings.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
The Pirates and Cardinals have the best 2 records in baseball, and they go head-to-head one final time this regular season. Could this be a preview of next week's division series? Coverage begins Wednesday at 6:30 Eastern on ESPN Radio.